My boyfriend said your promotion isn't a big deal. Anyone could get that position. Don't act proud, I replied. All right. I didn't celebrate, but a week later at his company dinner, when the CEO recognized my contribution publicly, he lowered his eyes so fast his friends immediately stopped talking. My name is Marianne Caldwell. I'm 34 and I work in tech consulting. My boyfriend Ethan Parker works at a pharmaceutical company in project management. We've always been competitive, but it was the fun kind. Or at least I thought it was until 3 weeks ago when I got promoted to senior consultant. I came home on a Thursday evening around 7. I'd stayed late at the office because my boss wanted to go over the new responsibilities with me. I was excited. This promotion meant better pay, more interesting projects, and recognition for the brutal weeks I'd been putting in for the past year. I walked through the door holding a bottle of champagne I'd picked up on the way home. Guess what I said, setting the bottle on the kitchen counter? Ethan was on the couch, laptop open, half watching something on TV, while scrolling through emails like he was allergic to silence. He didn't look up. What he said flat like I'd interrupted a meeting. I got the promotion, I said. Senior consultant. They announced it today. He paused for a second like he was deciding whether this was worth his attention, then went back to typing. Oh, that's nice. Nice, that was it. I stood there waiting for something more. A hug, a grin, a you did it. Anything that felt like he understood how hard I'd fought to get here. Instead, the room stayed exactly the same. The hum of the TV, the clicking keys, the champagne sweating on the counter like it had made a mistake coming home with me. I thought maybe we could celebrate, I said, gesturing to the bottle. He finally looked up, eyes narrowing the way they did when he thought someone was being dramatic. Your promotion isn't a big deal. Anyone could get that position. Don't act proud. It hit so fast I actually blinked like I'd misheard. What? I'm just being realistic, he said, already sliding back into that tone he used when he wanted to sound calm while cutting you open. It's not like you made partner or something. You're a senior consultant. Congratulations. You're middle management now. His words landed with this sharp, quiet thud like a knife hitting a cutting board. I felt my face heat up, not because I wanted to yell, but because something inside me went hollow. I'd been carrying this celebration in my chest all day, this bright, stubborn pride, and he'd flattened it with one sentence. Besides, he added, I'm tired. I don't feel like celebrating. I stared at him for a second too long, then picked up the champagne and put it in the fridge. The bottle clinked against the shelf, and I hated how small the sound was. All right, I said. That was it. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I didn't beg him to be happy for me. I went upstairs, changed out of my work clothes, and came back down like a woman returning to a scene after the fire's already gone out. We ate dinner in near silence. He talked about his day, some project that was giving him trouble, a coworker who couldn't keep up a manager he claimed was threatened by him. I nodded at the right moments, made the appropriate noises the way you do when you're trying to keep a peace that isn't really peace. Inside, I kept replaying it, don't act proud. Like pride was something I hadn't earned, like happiness was arrogance, like my win was an inconvenience to him. That night lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling while he slept next to me. 6 years together, and this is what my achievement got me. Dismissal, belittlement. And the worst part wasn't even the sentence, it was how easily it came out of him, like he'd been holding it in, and finally got permission to say it. I thought about all the times I'd celebrated his wins. When he landed his role at the pharmaceutical company, I booked dinner at a rooftop place and bought him that watch he'd been eyeing for months. When he finished a brutal presentation, I stayed up with him the night before, editing slides, testing the clicker, making sure he didn't walk in feeling alone. Even the small stuff, good feedback from his boss, a successful meeting. I'd been there smiling like his success was happening to both of us. And now here I was, staring at the ceiling, realizing I'd been clapping for someone who couldn't stand the sound when it was my turn. The next week was tense. I didn't bring up the promotion again. At work, my colleagues congratulated me. They took me out for drinks on Friday and kept calling me senior consultant with this grin like it was a crown. They asked why Ethan wasn't there. I made up an excuse about him being busy. Truth was, I hadn't invited him. What was the point? On Tuesday evening, he came home and tossed an envelope onto the counter like it was a bill I needed to handle. We need to go to this. I picked it up. It was an invitation to his company's annual dinner, black tie, fancy hotel downtown, scheduled for Saturday. The kind of event with name cards and speeches and people who pretended they weren't ranking each other all night. Do I have to? I asked. Yes, he said immediately. Everyone brings their partner. It would look weird if you didn't come. There it was. Not I want you there. Not I'd like you with me. Just optics, just how it would look. Fine, I said. He looked at me strangely. What's with the attitude? No attitude, I said. I said I'd go. He opened his mouth like he wanted to say something, then closed it and went to the bedroom. Saturday arrived. I put on a black dress that fit like armor and earrings I didn't even like. Ethan wore a suit and a confident expression like this night belonged to him. We drove to the hotel in silence, not the comfortable kind, the kind that felt like a wall in the car, separating my body from my own voice. The ballroom was full of people from his company, executives, managers, staff. I recognized a few faces from previous events. We sat at a table with some of his colleagues and their partners. Everyone was polite, making small talk. I smiled and nodded, played the supportive girlfriend. About an hour into the dinner, after the meal was served, the CEO stood up to give a speech. He talked about company achievements, thanked various departments, the usual corporate stuff. I was barely paying attention, just moving food around my plate, thinking about how I'd rather be anywhere else than sitting under chandeliers pretending my relationship wasn't bruised. Then the CEO said something that made my spine straighten. I also want to take a moment to recognize some external contributions that made a significant impact on our operations this year, he said, voice carrying cleanly across the room. Specifically, the consulting work done for our digital transformation project. My stomach tightened. Ethan's company had been one of my major clients for the past 8 months. I'd led the team that overhauled their entire project management system. It was the reason I got promoted, actually. But Ethan and I had an unspoken rule about not mixing our professional lives. He knew I worked with his company, but we never discussed the details. Not because it was healthy, because it was easier. Because we avoided anything that might trigger competition. The CEO continued. The lead consultant on that project delivered exceptional work. I believe she's actually here tonight as a guest. For a second, I didn't breathe. He looked around the room. Is she here? Ethan's colleague sitting next to him suddenly pointed at me like it was the most obvious thing in the world. That's her. The CEO smiled. Would you mind standing? I'd like to thank you publicly. I stood up slowly, and every eye in the room turned toward me. I felt the heat of attention, like a spotlight on skin. Applause started first from the CEO, then spreading through the ballroom until it became this wave that made the air feel thicker. And as I lifted my head, I glanced at Ethan. His face had gone completely still. He was staring down at the table shoulders, tight jaw locked, like if he didn't look at me, the moment wouldn't be real. His friends at the table were looking between us, confused, sensing something they couldn't name yet. One of them leaned closer to him, whispering a question. Ethan didn't respond. The CEO kept talking about efficiency improvements, about innovation, about how the project had changed how teams worked. The words blurred because all I could see was my boyfriend refusing to meet my eyes, while an entire room celebrated what he'd dismissed in our kitchen as not a big deal. And I realized, standing there in my black dress with hundreds of strangers clapping, that whatever happened next, this night was going to crack something open that Ethan had spent years keeping buried. The CEO went on for another minute about how the new system had improved their efficiency by 40%, how my team had been professional and innovative, how they had already recommended my firm to their parent company. I kept my posture, steady hands loosely at my sides, the way you do when you're trying to look composed while your heart is sprinting. Then I sat back down. For a beat, our table was silent in a way that felt unnatural. Like everyone was waiting for Ethan to do the normal human thing, smile, squeeze my hand under the table, whisper, "I'm proud of you." He did none of it. He didn't even look at me. He stayed angled toward his plate as if the linen and silverware were suddenly fascinating. His neck was stiff. The muscles in his jaw worked once, like he was grinding something bitter between his teeth. And the silence broke not with warmth, but with noise. "You never mentioned you were working with our company," one of his coworkers said, leaning toward me with wide eyes. "That project was incredible," another added. "My whole department still talks about it." "You led that?" a man across the table asked, half laughing in disbelief. No wonder it actually worked. I smiled politely, nodded, answered the questions. I said the right things. But I could feel the tension radiating from Ethan like heat off asphalt. Then his closest work friend, Vanessa Hart, a sharp-eyed woman with perfectly neat hair and the kind of voice people obeyed without realizing it, looked directly at Ethan, then back at me. "You knew about this, right?" she asked him. Ethan's eyes flicked up for half a second, then dropped again. "I knew she did consulting work," he said. "I didn't know the details." Vanessa's eyebrows lifted just slightly. Not judgment exactly, more like surprise that he'd admit that out loud. "But this is huge," she said, still looking at him. "The CEO never publicly thanks external consultants. This is a massive deal. Ethan's jaw clenched. He picked up his wine glass and took a long drink, like he needed the liquid to swallow whatever was rising in his throat. He still didn't look at me. He didn't say congratulations. Not once. It was like watching someone refuse to clap at a concert because they were mad the applause wasn't for them. And the part that made my stomach twist was how many people noticed it. Not because they were nosy, but because the contrast was loud. My recognition was public. His silence was public too. As the dinner continued, people from other tables came over to shake my hand. A manager stopped by to tell me they'd be requesting me specifically for future projects. Someone else joked, "We should put you on payroll already." I kept smiling. I kept thanking them. But every time I turned back to our table, Ethan was locked in the same posture. Tight shoulders, lowered eyes. The expression of a man trying to survive embarrassment without admitting it was embarrassment. At one point, when someone said, "Your partner must be so proud," I laughed lightly and said, "It was a team effort because I didn't trust myself to answer honestly." By the time dessert came, my face hurt from holding my smile in place. The car ride home was silent. Not the comfortable kind. The kind where you can feel anger radiating off someone, but they won't say anything because they know they're wrong. Ethan's hands stayed hard on the steering wheel, knuckles pale. The city lights slid across the windshield, and every red light felt like a pause where we might finally speak, but he never did. We got home around midnight. He went straight to the bedroom. I stayed downstairs, poured myself a drink, and sat in the dark living room with the TV off. The house felt too quiet, like it was holding its breath with me. About 20 minutes later, Ethan came back down. He was barefoot, tie loosened sleeves rolled up, like he was about to do damage control. He stopped a few feet away from me, arms folded. "Why didn't you tell me?" he said. I didn't move right away. I took a slow sip of my drink like I had all the time in the world. "Tell you what." "That you were leading that project," he snapped. "That it was such a big deal." I kept my voice even. "You knew I worked with your company." "Yeah," but he shook his head frustrated. "You never said it was that." I set the glass down carefully. "You never asked for details." "I shouldn't have to ask," he said. "You could have mentioned it." Why, the word came out sharper than I intended. "So you could tell me it wasn't a big deal, that anyone could have done it." His face tightened. I looked at him fully now, letting him feel the weight of what he'd started. "Like you did with my promotion." He flinched just slightly, like the memory had teeth. "That's different." "How?" I asked. "Explain how." He opened his mouth, then closed it again, then tried another angle. "I was having a bad day," he said. "I didn't mean it the way it came out." "You told me not to act proud," I said, voice steady but low. "You said my promotion was nothing special. And tonight, when your CEO thanked me in front of, 300 people, you couldn't even look at me." "That's not fair," he said immediately too fast, like he'd rehearsed the defense in the car. "What's not fair," I said, "is I've spent 6 years celebrating every single one of your achievements. And the one time I accomplish something significant, you tear it down." He paced 2 steps, ran a hand through his hair. "You didn't tell me you were leading that project." "You're still doing it," I said. "You're still making this about what I didn't do for you." He stopped, eyes flashing, because it made me look stupid. "There." The sentence hung between us like smoke. I let it sit for a moment before I spoke again. "So that's the real issue," I said softly. "Not my promotion, not your words in the kitchen, not the fact you didn't congratulate me, just how it made you look." He swallowed hard. "That's not what I meant." "It's exactly what you meant," I said. "And your friends noticed, by the way, at the table. They saw how you reacted, or didn't." His face reddened. "What are you talking about?" "You lowered your head the second the CEO praised my work," I said. "Vanessa asked if you knew about it, and you could barely put a sentence together. Everyone saw it." "You're being dramatic," he muttered, but his voice was weaker now. "Am I?" I asked, "because from where I'm standing it looked like you were embarrassed that your girlfriend got recognition at your company event, like it bothered you that people were congratulating me instead of you." Ethan opened his mouth, closed. It opened it again. For the first time that night, he looked like he didn't know which version of himself to commit to, the confident one or the insecure one he tried to hide behind sarcasm. "I just wasn't expecting it," he said finally. "Neither was I said. "But if the roles were reversed, I would have handled it better." I stood up. My legs felt steady, but my chest didn't. I walked past him, not rushing, not slamming anything, because I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of calling me emotional. Upstairs, I didn't go into our bedroom. I turned into the guest room instead and closed the door. On the other side, I heard Ethan's footsteps stop, like he'd realized too late this wasn't a fight I'd cool off from overnight. This was something that had been building quietly for weeks, maybe years. and tonight had simply exposed it under chandeliers. I lay on the guest bed, staring at the ceiling again, but this time I wasn't hollow. I was clear. Because now I knew something I hadn't wanted to admit in our kitchen. Ethan didn't just fail to celebrate me. He couldn't stand the idea that I had something to celebrate. And that meant the next conversation we had wasn't going to be about one dinner. It was going to be about who he was when I succeeded. The next morning, Sunday, Ethan was already up when I came downstairs. The smell of coffee filled the kitchen. He was sitting at the table with his laptop open, but he wasn't typing. He looked like he hadn't slept much. "We need to talk," he said. I poured myself coffee and sat across from him. "Okay." For a moment, he just stared at his hands. That alone was unusual. Ethan normally came armed with arguments. This time, he looked unprepared. "I've been thinking about what you said," he began. "About how I reacted to your promotion." He paused. I wasn't as supportive as I should have been. I didn't interrupt. "I know I wasn't," he added quietly. He closed his laptop like he was shutting down a defense mechanism. "The truth is, I was jealous." There it was again. Not anger, not logic, jealousy. "You got promoted," he continued, "and I've been passed over twice in the past year. I told myself it was politics. Timing. But when you came home that night so excited, all I could think about was how I'm still stuck in the same position." He rubbed his face. "It's not fair of me to take that out on you. But that's what I did." I watched him carefully. His voice wasn't sharp this time, it was raw. "And last night," he went on, "when the CEO thanked you, I felt like everyone was looking at me, like they were thinking, her girlfriend did this huge project and he didn't even know. It made me look incompetent." "So your concern is still how it made you look," I said calmly. He stopped himself mid-breath. "No, I mean yes, partially, but also I felt small." The word seemed difficult for him, like I should have known, like I should have been involved somehow. "We kept work separate because you said that's what you wanted," I reminded him. "You said it would prevent competition." "I know." He nodded slowly. "And I think I said that because I didn't want to see proof that you were ahead." The honesty startled me. He looked up at me fully now. "When you succeed, it shouldn't threaten me, but sometimes it does, especially when it's bigger than anything I've done." Silence stretched between us. Not hostile this time, just heavy. "Do you even know why I got that promotion?" I asked quietly. "Because of the project with my company," he said. "Because I worked 70-hour weeks for 8 months straight," I corrected. "Because I sacrificed weekends. Because I led a team and delivered results under pressure. It wasn't handed to me." "I know," he said. "Do you?" I pressed. "Because when I told you about it, you said anyone could get that position. Like it was nothing. Like I was nothing." His shoulders dropped at that. "I'm sorry," he said again, but this time it didn't sound defensive. It sounded defeated. "Sorry doesn't erase how that felt," I said. "You're supposed to be the person who's proudest of me, not the one who minimizes me." He swallowed. "What do you want me to do?" "I want you to understand this isn't just about jealousy," I said. "It's about respect, partnership. If you can't be happy when good things happen to me, then what are we building?" He didn't answer right away, and that silence told me more than any explanation could. Over the next few weeks, things were strange. Not explosive, not dramatic, just strained. Ethan tried harder. He asked about my projects. He acknowledged when I worked late. One night he even suggested we go out to properly celebrate my promotion. We went to a nice restaurant downtown. He raised a glass and said all the right things about my hard work, my talent, my drive. But it felt rehearsed, like he was ticking boxes on a list labeled supportive partner. The real shift didn't happen at dinner. It happened about a month later. He came home one evening looking exhausted. Not physically, but emotionally worn down. He dropped his bag by the door and stood there for a second like he wasn't sure how to start. "Vanessa pulled me aside today," he said. I leaned against the counter. About the dinner." He exhaled. "She asked if everything was okay between us." I waited. "She said everyone at our table noticed how I acted when the CEO thanked you. How I didn't congratulate you. Didn't seem happy." He ran a hand through his hair. "She said it didn't look good." "She's not wrong," I said quietly. "I know." His voice cracked just slightly, and it made me realize something. I've been so focused on my own career, on my own achievements, that I've turned into someone who can't celebrate anyone else's wins. He looked at me. "Especially yours." The admission hung in the air between us. "Because you're the closest person to me," he continued, "and that means your success somehow feels like my failure. That's a dangerous way to see a relationship," I said. "I know." He hesitated, then added, "I started seeing a therapist. That surprised me last week. Had my first session yesterday." He gave a small, humorless laugh. Apparently, I have some serious issues tying my self-worth to my job. When things don't go the way I planned professionally, I spiral. And instead of dealing with it, I lash out at whoever's closest. Which is me, I said. Yes. For the first time in weeks, I felt something shift. Not resolution, not forgiveness, but movement. I don't want to be that person, he said. I don't want to resent you for doing well. I don't want to resent you either, I replied. But if this continues, I will. He nodded slowly. I know. We stood there in the kitchen, not hugging, not smiling, just acknowledging that something had cracked open and that pretending it hadn't would cost us everything. It wasn't fixed, not even close. But for the first time, Ethan wasn't pretending the problem was my ambition. He was starting to admit it was his insecurity, and that mattered. 2 months after the dinner, just when things had settled into a cautious rhythm, something unexpected happened. I got a call from Richard Lawson, the CEO of Ethan's company. At first, I assumed it was about work, another project, a referral, something professional. Would you be open to meeting for coffee, he asked. Just the two of us. His tone wasn't corporate, it was measured, personal. We met at a quiet cafe near his office on a Wednesday morning. He ordered black coffee and didn't waste time on small talk. I wanted to talk to you about something delicate, he said. It's about Ethan. My stomach tightened. What about him? He folded his hands together. After the dinner where I thanked you publicly, I started noticing things more closely. I didn't interrupt. The way he interacts with his team, Richard continued. The way he responds when others get recognition. He's talented, no question. But there's a pattern that concerns me. I felt my pulse in my throat. He explained that several team members had complained about Ethan being dismissive when they achieved something. One junior employee had left a meeting in tears after Ethan minimized her successful presentation. Another colleague mentioned snide comments after someone else was promoted. I'm telling you this, Richard said carefully, because I think he needs help. And because what happened at that dinner, the way he reacted to your success. It made me realize this isn't just a workplace issue. The air felt heavy. What are you going to do? I asked. I've already spoken to him. Formally, Richard said. Told him that if this behavior continues, it will affect his career progression. But I wanted you to know. If he's struggling with competitiveness at work, I imagine it's affecting his personal life too. He was right. And suddenly the 2 missed promotions Ethan had blamed on politics didn't feel random anymore. When I got home that evening, I told him about the meeting. At first, he was furious. He had no right to discuss my performance with you, Ethan snapped, pacing across the living room. That's unprofessional. He didn't give details I shouldn't hear, I said calmly. He told me there's a pattern. That's ridiculous, he said automatically, then stopped, because he knew it wasn't. The anger drained out of him all at once. He sat down heavily on the couch and buried his face in his hands. I don't know how to stop, he said, his voice breaking in a way I had never heard before. Every time someone succeeds, it feels like they're taking something from me, like there's only so much success to go around. If they have it, I don't. That's not how it works, I said softly. I know that, he said. Logically, I know, but it doesn't change how it feels. That night, we talked longer than we had in months. Not about who was right, not about who looked bad at dinner, but about where this fear came from. In therapy, Ethan had started uncovering something he'd buried for years. Growing up, his parents compared him constantly to his older brother, who had been the golden child. Every report card, every trophy, every college acceptance letter came with the same message: why can't you be more like him? He'd learned early that love was conditional. Approval was earned. And if someone else shined brighter, it meant he'd failed. Understanding it didn't excuse what he'd done, but it explained the reflex. We started couples counseling. It wasn't cinematic. There were no dramatic breakthroughs, just uncomfortable truths, accountability, homework. At first, his attempts to change were mechanical. He would pause in conversations and say things like, I'm happy for them, almost, like he was practicing a foreign language. But slowly it became more natural. He started congratulating coworkers publicly instead of privately criticizing them. He apologized to the junior employee he'd embarrassed. He began noticing when jealousy rose in him instead of pretending it didn't exist. 5 months after the dinner, something happened that felt different. I came home one evening to find candles lit on the dining table. The lights were dim. Soft music played from the speaker in the corner. And there, chilling in a bucket of ice, was the same bottle of champagne I had placed in the fridge months ago. Ethan stood in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, finishing an elaborate dinner that clearly hadn't come from a takeout app. What's this? I asked. He looked at me, really looked at me, and smiled in a way that wasn't tight or forced. A proper celebration, he said. The one I should have given you 5 months ago. We sat down. He poured the champagne carefully like it mattered. He lifted his glass. To you, he said. To your hard work, your talent, your success. I'm proud of you. I should have said that the first night. There was no tension in his jaw, no flicker of resentment in his eyes, just warmth. And I realized something important. It wasn't the words. It was the absence of competition behind them. We're not perfect. Old patterns still try to surface sometimes, but now we catch them faster. We talk before silence turns into distance. Ethan was promoted last month. Not the position he originally wanted, but a step forward. When he told me, I celebrated him the way I always had. But this time, he didn't shrink under it. He stood in it. And later that night, he said quietly, I'm going to celebrate you the same way from now on. That's a promise. His colleagues have noticed the change too. Richard told me the team dynamic has improved. Vanessa mentioned Ethan feels different, more collaborative, less sharp around other people's success. As for me, I learned something difficult. Sometimes the people we love hurt us, not because they don't care, but because they're carrying wounds they've never faced. The question isn't whether they have wounds. It's whether they're willing to confront them. Ethan chose to do the work. That's why we're still together.